So, hello and good morning, everyone. So, let's continue with today's article, text and context. Today's article topic is de-dollarization, the race to attain the status of global reserve currency. While countries have tried to dethrone the dollar as the global reserve currency from many decades now for various reasons, of late such attempts have picked up pace in the aftermath of Russia's invasions of Ukraine last year. So after the sanctions of Russia, so de-dollarization has been practiced by many of the countries. So this article has been written by Prashant Perumal. De-dollarization refers to the replacement of US dollar by other currencies as global reserve currency. A reserve currency refers to any currency that is widely used in cross-border transactions and is commonly held as reserves by central banks. So mostly worldwide practiced currency that is used for exchange of transactions is dollar, as we know. Countries have tried to dethrone the dollar as the global reserve currency for many decades now for various reasons. But of late, attempts to de-dollarize have picked up pace in the aftermath of Russia's invasions of Ukraine last year. So this activity has been phased up just after the sanctioning on Russia. The US imposed several sanctions that restricted the use of US dollar to purchase oil and the goods from Russia. And this has been seen by many countries as an attempt to weaponize the dollar. Since international transactions carried out in the US dollar are cleared by American banks, this gives the US government a significant power to oversee and control the transactions. So currently the Chinese yuan is seen as the primary alternative to the US dollar owing to China's rising economic power. So every country after sanctions on Russia, most of the countries are feared that if their opinion of interest will not match with US in the future, so maybe the US will try to weaponize the dollar and they will try to put sanctions on any particular country. And currently Chinese yuan is seen as a alternative to US dollar for exchange of transactions across the worldwide. The reserve currency advantage. So what are the advantages of reserve currency? As we know that most of the countries put their reserve country in the form of dollar and the SWIFT banks. So you know SWIFT, you can search it on Google what is SWIFT. The reserve currency advantage. The other currencies such as British pound and the French franc have served as international reserve currency in the past. It should be noted that it is the currencies of economic superpowers that have usually ended up being used as the global reserve currency. As the economic clout of these countries waned, their currencies faced as a similar downfall. This was the case, for example, with the British pound, which was gradually replaced by the US dollar as Britain lost its status as a global economic superpower in the first half of the 20th century. So earlier, most of the countries were used to put global reserve currency in the form of US dollar or France franc. Francs were put in most of the African countries used to practice. They were putting French franc in the form of global reserve currency. But right now, I don't know. This is the scenario, and right now, most of the countries used to put a dollar as a reserve global reserve currency. And as gradually the time passed and British lost its super economic status and slowly and gradually US emerged as a super global power. So now most of the countries used to put dollar as a reserve currency. Critics of the US dollar believe that the global reserve currency status gives its unfair privilege over the countries, thus justifying de-dollarization attempts by many countries. Critics of the US dollar believe that the global reserve currency status gives it unfair privilege over the countries. Just thus justifying de-dollarization attempts by many countries. It should be noted that when a country fiat currency enjoys a reserve currency status, it gives the country the power to purchase goods and other assets from the rest of the world by simply creating a fresh currency out of thin air. However, such irresponsible expansion of the money supply can cause the debasement of the currency and eventually threatens its status as a reserve currency. So it is the author is also talking that so whenever some country's currency is used as a global reserve currency, then the country enjoys power, such as they can print so much of money, but at the same time they have to face devalue their currency also. So, but optimum they try to manage it. They would try to control both of the activities because if they print so much of money, their devaluation will go on of the currency. Other points to the expansionary monetary policy adopted by the US Federal Reserve over the decades to argue that this could threaten the US dollar status as a global reserve currency. The US central banks usually increases the supply of dollars through various means to tackle economic downturns and also funds the US government's expenditure. But it should be noted that the US Federal Reserve is not only the central bank in the world that has been debasing its currency by engaging expansionary monetary policy over several decades. So other countries have also been expanding their respective money supplies to address their domestic economic problems. As long as US does not debase its currency at a faster pace than other countries, the dollar they manage to hold its value against other countries and hence its reserve currency status may not come under serious threat. So actually what US is doing, it is not printing as much money as it is required. So they are not able to devalue their currency because if they will devalue their valuation will go down with respect relative to other currencies. So their status will go down. So that's why they are not doing it and they are printing their money in the limited amount, so their devaluation of the dollar will not go on, and the the value of US dollar with relative to other currencies will be much maintained. Okay, the popularity of the US dollar. Many economists argue that the US dollar is not forced on anyone to be accepted as a medium of exchange for the cross-border transaction. Just give me a second. You note that US dollar is widely used in international transactions because people actually prefer to use the American currency over other various forms of economic reason. Other currencies that have tried to compete against the US dollar are not as popular as the greenback for carrying out international transactions. For example, a recent attempt by India and Russia to carry out the to trade between two countries in India rupee rather than US dollar. The US dollar has hit a roadblock because the value of India's imports from Russia far outweighs its exports to the country. Since it is a popular US dollar is popular in the world, so whenever you go somewhere that whenever tourists some go somewhere to for any other places to visit, you see that exchange of currency is being placed in the in terms of dollar, not in local currency. Even local currency is also not much promoted in the tourism sector. See that so now the author is talking that there are not any other country currencies that is similar that has similar popularity than as US dollar. So right now, US after the sanctions on Russia, India has tried to do trade with Russia in terms of Indian currency, but that has not been taken place because the trade deficit of India is far higher as compared to Russia. So because most of the Russia exports most of the crude oil to India, but India hardly exports anything to Russia. So this left Russia with excess rupee in hand, which it was unwilling to spend on Indian goods on assets, and led to Russia demands for the settlement for bilateral trades in the US. So even Russia, a long-time friend of India and a long-time foe of the United States, preferred to carry out its trade with India US dollar, since the dollar is far more widely acceptable than the Indian rupee. So why Russia is showing reluctance to do trade with India with Indian rupees? So the first, the most important reason is that if suppose as you know that Russia exports many things to India, and and India hardly imports India hardly exports to Russia. So if they will do trade with rupee in real, sorry, I think the currency of Russia is rupee and ruble. So the what the amount of Russia will do with that Indian rupees, because they hardly do some trade with India. So where they will invest all those Indian rupees? So this comes in question. That's why Russia is showing the reluctance to do trade in Indian rupees. The global acceptability of the US dollar has primarily been attributed to the popularity of US assets among investors. It should be noted that US has been running a persistent trade deficit for decades now. In fact, the last time the US ran a trade surplus way back in 1975. So most of the investors also used to try to use or prefer to use US dollar. It should be noted that US has been running as a persistent trade deficit for decades now. In fact, the last time, so, but even after having so much practiced dollar as a global reserve currency, since now the US has been in trade deficit. And in 1975 was the only last year when the US was in trade surplus. So that is the value of its import for a long time exceeded the value of its export to the rest of the world. The excess dollar that rest of the world accumulates due to US trade deficit has been invested in US assets such as in debt securities issued by the US government. The high level of trust that global investors have in the US financial markets, perhaps owing to the rule of law in the US, is considered to be a major reason why investors prefer to invest in US assets. It should be, however, be noted that it is not necessary that country must run a trade deficit for its currency to be accepted as a reserve currency. Most of the investors prefer to use US dollar for an investment because US dollar is a stable currency. It doesn't fluctuate that much with respect to other currency. And author is also suggesting that it should be noted that it is not necessary that country must run a trade deficit for its currency. So just for a sake of trade deficit, you can't accept other currency as a reserve currency. China, for instance, which supplies the world with huge volumes of goods and runs a trade surplus, has been trying to make the yuan a reserve currency. However, the restrictions placed by Chinese government on foreign access to China's financial market and doubts over rule of law in China has been adversely affected by the global demand for the yuan. So China has been trying, since China is, the manufacturing hub of the world is China, because labor cost is very cheap there. So that's why the China is always in trade surplus, and they always wanted to be yuan as a global reserve currency. And but the China's financial markets and also, but they also doubts over whether they will be able to make their Chinese yuan as a global reserve currency or not. So this is in question. So this is today's articles. Today's article's name is De-dollarization, the race to attain the status of global reserve currency. So conclusion. So conclusion of the article is that, so after the Russia after the US has put so many sanctions on Russia, just after the US Russia Ukraine war. So de-dollarization has been practiced by most of the country because they are fearing that if in future their opinion of interest will not match with the US, then maybe US will try to weaponize the dollar and put sanctions on it, and they will try to crush the economy of any particular country. Those who will not, those whose interests were not aligned with the US. So that's why most of the country is trying to put not so much dependence on dollar, and they will try to make some they are just moving their hands out of the dollar. So that's all from today's side.